When you think of the gig economy, you might think of a self-employed taxi driver or cyclist delivering takeaway food. But what about fostering? Today, one woman is launching a potentially landmark legal claim to have foster carers recognised as workers. Sarah Anderson has been a carer for 10 years and argues that she and others like her should be entitled to rights including paid holidays and protection from discrimination. But her local council, Hampshire County Council, says the law is clear. Foster carers are not workers. Well, we'll hear from Sarah Anderson shortly, but first we're joined by our legal correspondent, Clive Coleman. Thank you for coming in. Clive, first of all, just explain for us, if you would, the details of this claim.
Okay, so what this claim is really about is whether foster carers are entitled to be called workers. Now, workers isn't just a descriptive word, it's a specific legal term. And workers, as classified by the law, are entitled not to the full set of employee rights, the rights that someone who is an employee would get, but to a very substantial raft of rights. So, as you mentioned, the right to paid holidays, the right to protection from discrimination, whistleblowing protection, the national minimum wage, a whole raft of rights accrue to you, are given to you if you're deemed to be a worker. The issue is that foster carers historically have not been classed as workers. And the reason for that is there is legal authority which says that the agreement that they have either with their local authority or with the agency that they work under, as it were, that is not a legally binding contract. That's what our courts have said, and they've said that because they say the terms of that contract are set in law. In a normal contract, the parties negotiate the terms freely, and that is a legally binding contract if that process takes place. And in order to be categorised either as a worker or as an employee, you have to be employed under a contract that's freely negotiated. So the issue at the heart of this case, and Sarah's case, is asking the courts really to look at the job that foster carers do and to determine whether they should be classified as workers and entitled to those rights.
Clearly, if this succeeds, there's benefits for foster carers like Sarah, but there's also implications, not least financial, presumably.
Well, there are financial implications because one of the things that you would be entitled to is paid holiday. Now, there are some 55,000 foster households in the UK looking after something like 64,000 children. And of course, the work is very, very important work. But if each of the foster carers involved, and sometimes, as in Sarah's case, there are two foster carers in a particular house that Sarah fosters with her husband, then if they have to be paid for leave, for 5 weeks leave a year, there's a cost there. And also, obviously, the children have to be looked after when they're on leave. So there's a public funding implication. The taxpayer would have to meet that. There are also implications in terms of the legal liability. Certainly if foster carers are deemed to be employees, but even as workers, there are really important issues of where responsibility lies for what happens to the child. So it's a really complex issue. It's a thorny issue, but as you said, we've seen cases in the gig economy. I wouldn't really call this a gig economy case because foster carers have been doing what they've been doing for a very long time. They long predates the gig economy. But it's the same issue. The Uber drivers gained status as workers. That's now being appealed. And that's exactly what Sarah and other foster carers want.
Clive, thank you ever so much for explaining that to us. Well, joining us now is Sarah Anderson, a foster carer of 10 years and chair of the Foster Care Workers Union, and fellow foster carer Martin Barrow, who's written about his experiences. Thank you both for coming in. So, Sarah, first of all, why is it so important to you to get this worker status?
I think that the trouble is with foster care is that nobody really knows much about it. We're either fantastic angels or we're kind of child-beating, if you watch the telly, sort of money grabbers. Nobody really understands what we truly do. I think they think that little orphan Annie turns up on the doorstep and we all live happily ever after, and that we're marvellous because of it. Nothing could be further from the truth in today's fostering landscape. The children are getting more challenging. We are asked to do a huge raft of things now that we wouldn't have before.
Like what? Give us an example of a day in your life.
A day in my life can be involved with the child exploitation teams. We could have a child that's absconded, so we're up all day and all night and we're not on shift work. We will involve ourselves with the police, with the social services out-of-hours team. We will then the next day be involved in the mental health teams. We will be involved in school, obviously. It's a non-stop kind of job. And that's not to say that the people like Martin who have younger ones have any less to do. It is a full-time occupation these days. Does that mean we don't love and adore and care for our children? Of course it doesn't. But we want to be recognised for what we do and be protected.
Martin, do you welcome this idea of this worker status for you as a foster carer?
So I welcome the debate and the attention that foster care, that Sarah's exceptional work and campaigning. I welcome the spotlight on foster care because, as you say, it's much misunderstood and underappreciated by the population at large. I am not sure that employment status really addresses the issues worker status and employment rights really addresses the issues that confront foster care at the moment. And I really do, ideally, I would like the day to come when two foster carers sit around the table here and discuss what matters for children and young people rather than what is important for us and how we can improve our lot. Do
you think it looks bad then?
I think that is a concern for me. I think that anything that we gain, although it will be welcomed by some because it will make a big difference about the way in which they can provide care, and I understand that. I think money is important and these rights will make a difference to some foster carers. But I think we have to be very careful that anything that we gain may well be taken away from other people, particularly from children and young people.
Sarah, how would you respond to that?
Well, that's an argument we hear a lot of, specifically from the powers that be that don't want us to be in this position. And,
But the money's got to be found from somewhere, hasn't it?
This is an interesting thing, you see. From my part looking in, say, for instance, where can we find this money from? They say it's taxpayers' money, goes straight to the children. I totally accept that we live in a capitalist society, free market and everything, but there's such things as massive private fostering agencies that charge the local authorities a fortune for having the children. Now, in the last couple of years, we've looked it up, obviously, and done our research. One particular large independent of agency, the couple that own that agency that year made a personal profit of £6 million. Now, that's straight out of the taxpayer's pocket into the local authority for the children and off to the private agencies. There's money somewhere.
Is there a danger that you attract people to fostering for the wrong reason?
Another sort of one of those kind of myth-busting things that we need to do. Are we saying that that promoting foster care as a more professionalised, skilled, specialist industry that's unionised and protected, and that foster carers can come in feeling they've got standing, they've got rights, and they've got some protection? Are you telling me that's going to, get the wrong people in?
So we provide a fostering service to West Sussex County Council. We've only ever worked for our local authority and probably would not work for anybody else. Who do I actually work for? I would argue that I don't work for West Sussex County Council, I don't work for the Department for Education. I work for the children and young people who come into our care. My responsibility to them, I am their advocate. I represent their interests. I don't represent the interests of West Sussex County Council. I want to be in a position where I am completely independent, where I can disagree with West Sussex County Council. I can turn down a placement if I don't think it's suitable. I can argue all day and all night with West Sussex County Council if I believe that it is in the best interest of the children who are in our care.
But
now, will giving me employment rights, worker status, I think inevitably it will change the relationship that I have with West Sussex County Council. For some people more than for others.
But we do know, for example, that there aren't enough foster carers, don't we, at the moment? Could this be a way that if people look at this and say, actually, I'll be able to have a life where I can take a break if it's all getting a bit too much, could that attract more foster carers to come forward?
I believe not. Now, if I had the right to a holiday, I would not use it. I would not, when the children are in our care, we would not take a holiday without them. End of. What we do is we take a break at the end of each placement. Typically our placements last for at least a year. Our current placement has lasted for almost two.
But I guess your point is it's about being paid for that.
Well, the greatest respect to Martin. Martin, as a I think, ex-editor of The Times, and writes about his experience of foster care. He's not in the precarious position that our members are. The IWGB, Foster Care Workers Union, the hundreds of members that we represent aren't in a position where they've paid their mortgage off or anything. They're a really vulnerable set of workers that if they lose their job the next day, and not everybody, we do need a break from the children. That's not because we don't love and adore them. When my children come to me, we say to them, look, Tim and I take a couple of weeks off every year, and it's not because we don't want to be with you, it's because we need to recharge our batteries, be grown-ups and silly together, and not actually have to have responsibility for anyone. It's very difficult when people kind of elevate themselves to a position and say, where we wouldn't dream of going away without taking our children. But that demeans the hundreds and hundreds of carers out there that do need a holiday and are exhausted.
OK, thank you ever so much, both of you, for coming in to speak to us. The Minister for Children and Families, Robert Goodwill, gave us this statement. We recognise the huge contribution foster carers make in giving children the best possible chance to fulfil their potential. We've commissioned Sir Martin Neri and Mark Owers to lead an independent review of fostering and how we can improve it. It is a comprehensive review of the fostering system in England that will help us better understand how and where the system is working well so that we can share the best practice across the country. This will look at issues such as the status of foster carers and the support that they receive. Still to come.